welcome to episode 15 of the Offsite podcast, where we chat all things construction and technology. My name's Carlos Caballo.
And I am Jason Lancini. Carlos, I need to immediately pull you up on something, my friend. Earlier in the week or last week, you posted something on LinkedIn, which was a let's say, a stereotypical starter kit for an engineer. And it's had me reevaluating my wardrobe.
It just Oxford shirts?
It cut a little bit too close to home. Luckily for me, I can't grow a beard very well, so I don't quite fit in the mold. But yeah, it cut a little bit too close to home.
You grow one of those little kind of goatee stubbles, don't you, if you grow a beard?
I have a great beard for a 12-year-old, yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I think, that post, it came out of the woodwork with basically everyone tagging their mate and was like, this is literally you. So, I think it summarizes the engineer pretty well.
There was a comment on there which stuck with me, which was like, I can't remember what exactly it said, but it was like the male, pale and stale brigade, which also cut very close to home, because I was like, am I that pale?
Yeah. You have to get Ollie to sort that out for you.
Yeah, okay.
Nice. Right. So today we're going to be chatting about the relationship between engineers and QSs. I'm sure that'll be fairly heated based on our backgrounds. But first up, Jason, I asked you to pull together a topic. What have you got in mind?
Okay, cool. So Carlos asked me to do some work to think of a topic that we should be covering. And the first thing that came to mind is every year in the UK, there's this thing called the Contractor League Table. It used to be something that people looked at a lot. I don't know if most of anyone listening to this would be looking at it, but basically it ranks the contractors by like volume of work performed in the year. And it normally comes out about now. I think last year it came out, like, we're recording this on the 3rd of August. So it comes out like 2 days or something from now, a year ago. So it's probably imminently due out. And so for my topic, I thought I'd get Carlos to do a whole bunch of work, which is to put himself out there and essentially make a prediction of who the top 5 contractors would be in the league tables when they're released, in the near future. So for context, the top 5 contractors in last year's league table in the UK, so 2022, the top 5 were Balfour Beatty with 8.26 billion turnover, Kier Group, which 3.3, so less than half of Balfour's 3.32. Then Morgan Sindall with about the same 3.2. Then Amy at 2.4 billion, and then number 5 was ISG at about 2.26. So I guess the question to you, Carlos, is this: if you had to put money on it, we'll talk about the money bit after, but if you had to put money on it, what would you be saying is likely the top 5 for this year?
So I brought up the league table here just because I wanted to see some of those stats to help me think about the answer. But right, if I had to put money on it, obviously first up, Balfour Beatty, they're not going anywhere. They're not even leaving the top spot. They're doing 8.2 billion. They're still winning loads of work. So that's nailed on.
They've got like one of the largest projects in the UK, being that section of High Speed 2, don't they? And I think it is the largest. I think that's a safe bet. Like, that's better than most of your like crypto investments and stuff that you were making. That's a good bet for number 1, I think. Sorry,
definitely do better than that. 100% Balfour Beatty staying on the top. I'd bet pretty much everything I earned on that happening. Next up, Kier. I can't see them drifting out. They got into a pretty bad spot. What was it, 2-3 years ago? They were like seriously losing cash. They had a big reshuffle in terms of management. They've pulled it back into the black. They've won a lot of work. Obviously, I work with them pretty closely, so I know the volume of new projects sort of popping up, not small stuff. So I'd absolutely back them to stay in the second spot. So that's another.
Do you think they close in on Balfour Beatty, or the gap remains?
If you just track news, I'd say in the last 6 months, without actually looking back and counting up, you see more Kier news than Balfour Beatty on winning projects.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that swings Balfour Beatty is they do like loads of like maintenance contracts and like stuff for like network rail, which isn't like the glamorous stuff that you would see in the news, but it's obviously hugely revenue generating. So I think if you just look at like actual sort of contractor jobs, I reckon Kier is pretty close to Balfour, but Balfour have that other side of the business that's just like the revenue's huge.
Yeah, and you know, looking at last year's league table, that side might be where a lot of the profit is as well, because like they're ranked like number 3 by profit as well. Whereas like a number of the other ones by turnover have like really, really, really tight or negative margins.
Yeah. Like a good job is 3%, which is disgusting considering how risky like main contractor contracts are.
Don't get me don't get me started on that. Like I wrote my whole like master's thesis about like how tough it is to be a contractor. Agreed.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, Balfour Beatty, Kier, Morgan, Sindall. Morgan, they're winning a lot of jobs. They've got like, they've got a serious amount of infrastructure jobs alone. They're growing in the building sector, it seems too, but they're quite heavily involved in things like prisons and a lot of the sort of larger frameworks. Last year, it looks like they were on the grow. So you could see on the table, quite a significant turnaround from the previous year in terms of profit and change. So I've got no information to mind that would sort of signal a downturn or a reverse in direction from the up on last year. So I'd probably stick them in third spot still, based on that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, they're at that spot in number 3 last year, and you're picking them to be the same cost, because if I think, the UK market better than me, you talk to teams there literally all the time and I don't, but I can't think of them on any of the like major, like, are they on any of the major sections of high speed 2, Carlos?
No, they're not on high speed 2, but they're on like Thames Tideway. They're on smart motorways. They're on things like Sellafield. So they do have the big, pretty large contracts, but they're definitely are lots of slightly smaller contracts compared to like if you look at the infrastructure sector of say Costain and Skanska, who only do large contracts, small volume. I'd pin those as a top 3. Pretty easy top 3. It's like predicting the Premier League top 3. I won't talk to an Australian about football in any more depth, but that was easy.
As far as I'm concerned, that's really hard because I have to make up the 3 teams.
If you like the London Broncos,
the dinosaurs versus the Sharks. No.
Yeah. Getting very American there. So, but then I'd say it does get quite interesting. So ISG, they were on the way up, but there was some quite negative news in the last year about some issues within that organization. And I didn't see lots and lots of news around them winning new work. They're probably still doing similar revenue, but Keller are close behind, and they've cracked some serious contracts on Neon for groundworks. So I reckon one prediction could be Keller jumping ISG and ISG potentially dropping out of the top 5. So
this is gonna make my version of these predictions sound super boring because I predicted the same thing. Okay, yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna put Keller in 4th. Amy, it's really hard to gauge Amy because they do loads of stuff as like joint venture partners. They do like proper rail. They do lots of consultancy stuff. So it's hard to get a gauge on that. But Mace have been winning a lot of work. Mace are fairly global. They've just won their biggest like UK building job in a number of years, I believe. So I reckon Mace are on the up. Whether they can pull back, how much do they need? like £500 million to get into the top 5. I reckon they're probably the most likely contender to crack it. So I'm going to stick Mace in at 5th above Amy and ISG as my wild card.
Okay, so Balfour Beatty, Kier, Morgan, Sindall, Keller, and then Mace.
Yeah, that's what I'd put a lot of money on the first 3. I put a little bit of money if you give me decent odds on the top 5. But yeah, that would be my 5. The other one, who I was thinking about against Mace, was Lang O'Rourke. They're pretty close too. They are, like, we know they're a super innovative company. They do manage their projects well. They're winning decent sized jobs. They're on a load of major schemes. So if there was one that I'd put in the same sort of potential wild card as Mace, it would be Lang, but they're already a couple of $100 million behind Mace. So I think it would be a serious leapfrog to get into top 5, albeit I reckon they're on the upward trend.
So I had a similar list in my head, although now I'm questioning, because I had done Balfour Beatty, Kier, Morgan, Sindall, Keller, and then I put Lang O'Rourke.
Okay.
And like Lang O'Rourke, super innovative. They've got a lot of business outside of the UK as well. They've got a lot of projects down here in Australia, big value projects. But the thing that I'm now questioning is whether, like, Keller, I don't know that they've delivered that work this year. Like, they've won the contract, but it's probably next year's work. They definitely started it this year.
There may be like 6 months worth of work or something that would be like contributing.
So I don't know if we'll end up eating our words with Keller, but yeah, so we've got a very similar list, which is kind of a boring topic, but you know, maybe we're both right.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't even think about the volume of projects that Lang have won in Australia.
No, you can't change your bet now. That's you already bought Dogecoin or whatever it was.
Yeah. Let's go back a few years. Thank you, Elon Musk. Right. Yeah, no, that was really interesting. I like that. I think so. You say the report's out in a few days, so next week you can actually call me out on any
total
predictions.
Speculation, just by the fact that it was out on the similar time a year ago. I think they do.
Yeah, that's fair.
They did the cutoff at Company's House 29th of July 2022, which means 29th of July 2023-ish, somewhere around there. Which means someone's probably compiling the list as we speak. Is my guess.
Yeah. So next up, I want to have a chat with you about the relationship between engineers, specifically the package lead, so like a section engineer and agent typically, and the QS. In my experience, the most successful packages I've worked on is where you have a tight relationship with your engineer. And I've got a lot of experience of some engineers who aren't so keen on that being such a tight relationship. So to kick off, I'm keen to have your view on this, particularly as you're obviously from Australia. Australia don't really have QSs in the same form or capacity as here. So you are probably more used to working without one and therefore are more aware of the commercial side of things.
Yeah, engineers in Australia can do math on their own.
Yeah. But you have worked in the UK. So yeah, what's your experience of that and your view on the relationship?
Yeah. Without like doing the cliched like thing of just slamming that we don't need QSs. Obviously in Australia we don't really have them on most projects. There are some schemes more recently or projects more recently that are using QSs. But I guess fundamentally, and this would probably be a view that has been reflected from a lot of people that I know that have worked in both places, and specifically the ones that came from Australia, is like, as you progress through the roles of like a site engineer to a project engineer or an agent or a sub-agent or whether you're in Australia or the UK, like ultimately your job is to deliver a project, but also your job is to deliver a project for a profit. And so if you're not owning the profit and what the numbers are at your head contractor or at your subcontracts, I don't know really how you can deliver the job. I kind of think of it. I don't know if you watch like I don't know if you watch like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, Carlos.
Yep.
But like occasionally you'll get someone come in and pitch some business. They'll be like, they'll do this pitch, and then as soon as they get any questions, they're like, "Well, I'm not the numbers guy."
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you run a business and not be the numbers guy? Like, it's kind of like I'm the engineer, but like, if you want to know about whether we're making money, talk to my QS. It's like, it's kind of like that is your job. So I just don't know. I don't know any other way to operate other than doing that job as the engineer. I would be interested, you mentioned that some of the more successful packages that you've worked on had that good relationship. So it's probably more instructive to start from your perspective and go, how does it actually work when it works well?
For anyone listening in the UK, Jason just did a very famous line that Roy Keane says about every football player and the fact that it's your job. But I won't reference that now because that won't make sense to you.
I definitely wasn't Roy who? I wasn't quoting Roy Bean.
Keane.
Okay, Roy Keane.
Don't worry about it. Yeah. So I 100% agree that engineers need to be aware and conscious and care about commercial. So I definitely don't see this thing as being like the QS does all of that and the engineer just crack on with their job. But it's like, it's both ways too. So the QS also needs to have a good understanding, needs to like shadow, sit on the meetings, understand the gossip. Because, so if we think about NEC, there's no way engineers can do that themselves unless they have 20 hours a day to do work, because it's like admin heavy. There's so many sort of contractual requirements that you have to go through, and an engineer's time is not best placed doing that. So I would say you would want a quick QS to do that anyway, just to administer the contract. But then I'd also argue that I've never come across an engineer who has an understanding of cost to the end of the project and think about the factors that could be at play and actually have a good understanding of that. And I don't know if that's because I've only worked in the UK and because it's not their job, they don't think about it. And I'm not implying that they don't know how to do that or could work it out, because like a civil engineer is a pretty clever person. And I'm not saying like QSs are like super special, but the time aspect.
If you're sorry to like cut you off and jump in, but like if you're a project engineer on an infrastructure project in Australia, you have a job every month, which is to do forecasting, which forecasts your cost to completion of the job.
Labor, plant, materials.
Everything. Yep. So if you walk into that meeting and you don't know those numbers, you're getting like torn to shreds. It's just a ritual that happens every month on projects. So you definitely have to know cost to completion and where you're tracking over and under by cost.
Project manager goes full Peter Jones like Dragon's Den and tears you apart for not knowing. Question then. So you were all over the numbers in Australia. And is that
why
because
did you lose money in the UK? No, sorry.
Yeah, you can ask that to anyone across now. You did that over there, so it was your job. But did you actually have a genuine care and interest for it? And I guess the real gauge of that is, did you still do that in the UK even though it wasn't your job?
I had a slightly different job in the UK, so it was probably not like a fair comparison.
Right.
And the job that I went on to had more QSs than I'd ever seen in my life on a single project, so it probably wasn't like a fair, like there was enough people doing it already.
Yeah.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it in the role in Oz. It made the process of, it gave you a bigger understanding of how construction happens, and it made it into, I guess, more of a, there's just another layer to the game, if you know what I mean. So it's like it's like you start learning like deeper moves in chess or something, you know. There's like the technical aspect, there's like the managing people and getting the information they need, but then there's also like the how do we make money piece, how do we manage contracts.
Yeah, so managing contract side. So the money piece, like you can see why anyone is interested in that, because it is interesting. Like it contextualizes everything that you're doing, and ultimately everyone wants to make money or a margin. If you look at the administering the contract side, do you think engineers should be firing out early warnings, writing site instructions, assessing payment applications.
Yeah, this is like, obviously you said something before, which is like under NEC, you would want to
admin
QS.
heavy.
Like,
yeah,
I think there's a whole topic for another discussion in the future, which is like, is that good? Because definitely the amount of paperwork generated under NEC is like you can't also run the project as an engineer if you're trying to do that and keep up with it. But then that asks the question, like, is that just like an enormously inefficient process then? Like if I pull the numbers on how, and like, that's just on the administering of it, but the argument for it, again, this is probably for another podcast. The argument for it is that, okay, well, NEC is a more like, I guess, collaborative or early warning, so you sort out issues so that projects don't end in dispute. But if you pull the numbers from a Pinsent Mason study in 2021, 15% of projects in Australia, infrastructure projects in Australia, end in dispute, while 20% in the UK end in dispute. So like it's costing more to administer is my theory under NEC, and more of the projects end in dispute. So what is the return on investment? Anyway, that's definitely a topic we're going to cover on another time.
I love how you had to, in preparation for this debate, actually have to go to Pinsent Masons to pull some stats out to try and win the argument. But no, it's definitely NEC's super admin heavy. There's loads of arguments to say it's wildly inefficient. Yes, you might reduce the chance of disputes later, but the volume of staff you need is insane. I think I had one project, there was 45 QSs on a £400 million job, which is like, that can't make sense to anyone. But anyway, that is all we have time for today. So as always, thank you very much for listening.